As soon as you look at a chart of compounded investment returns over time, what you realize is that it starts going up much more steeply at the end.
Yeah.
No one gets to that end and says, I really regret starting when I did. I should have started later.
Yeah.
You always want to have started sooner so that you get more years at the end when everything's compounding rather rapidly. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm very pleased to be joined on the pod today by Fidelity's Marianna Hunt to talk about money mistakes, specifically about the mistakes that can befall you in your 20s. It's the time when many of us first get exposed to the world of money, thanks to regular salaries and access to credit cards and loans, and that can make it a dangerous time when we can make damaging mistakes. We're here to help you, or perhaps your children, avoid those mistakes. Before all of that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, join the discussion in the comments below, perhaps leave your money mistakes there as well. It's going to help other people find what we're doing here, and it means that you'll get new content as soon as it is released. That all said, Marianna, welcome along. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Ed?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Now, money mistakes. It might be easy to think that the stakes are quite low when you're in your 20s, i.e. a younger adult, because I guess, well, the money is, the amounts are lower, aren't they? But actually, the habits we form early in our financial lives, they really matter, don't they?
Absolutely. And I think it's really tempting to think, as you say, I'm not earning very much. I'll wait till I'm on a bigger salary to figure all this out. But actually, the decisions that you make and the habits that you form when you're in your 20s will probably stick with you for a lifetime. And that's true of the good decisions, things like paying into a pension or saving a bit of your salary each month. They'll compound over years. But the bad decisions too, so things like taking on bad debt or spending more than you earn, those too can compound negatively over decades. So actually, weirdly, the stakes are almost higher when you're in your 20s. And if I think back to my early 20s, I was on, let's say, not very much money, just starting out in journalism, couldn't even afford to rent a property. So I was living with my mum's friend who was very kindly putting up with me. But I was still trying to put away as much as I could every month to save up for that rental deposit. And the discipline and the weird frugal habits that I developed then, I still have today. Like, you can personally attest to the fact that I never buy lunch in our work canteen. I will always have meal prepped all of my lunches on a Sunday. So it's funny how these things stick with you.
Indeed, they absolutely do. Yeah. And I think, so much is sort of the cast or the die is cast, or whatever the phrase is, in those early years, you sort of live with, there are some financial stakes. It's absolutely possible to make good and bad financial decisions. But as you say, a lot of this is about habits, good and bad habits. We're going to cover off 5 big mistakes that people can make in their 20s when it comes to money. Clearly not an exhaustive list, but these are 5 common mistakes, aren't they? In fact, that you've written about, Marianna. The first of those is a big one, and it is not signing up to a pension. Might not be the first thing that's on the mind of most 20-somethings, but it can be a very costly mistake to make, can't it?
Absolutely. So when you're in your 20s, there's lots of spending pressures. So when you get those early pay slips and you see hundreds of pounds being taken off for things like tax, national insurance, student loan, and this thing called pension contributions. So when you find out that that's optional, it can be very tempting to think, right, well, I will opt out. But actually, that can really hurt you for decades to come for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because if you opt out of your pension, then your employer most likely won't be paying in either. And there's a bit of a bargain between you and your employer that if you're contributing to the pension, they will too. So essentially, you're missing out on free money for your future by doing that. Then there's the fact that you're missing out on free money from the government as well. So you also have a bargain with the government, which is that if you're contributing to your pension, they will top up anything you put in by at least 20%, which is what's known as tax relief. And how that works in practice is that if you want to put £100 into a pension, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, that will only cost you £80 because the government is putting in £20 for you. So again, by opting out, you're missing out on that government top up. And the final point is that if you opt out of a pension when you're young, it makes it so much harder to save because you've got fewer years for those investments to grow. And we know that time is the magical ingredient with investing. And £100 invested when you're 20 will most likely be worth a lot more than £100 invested when you're 40 because of how long you have for that investment to grow.
Yes, indeed. There's a lot to cover here, but I mean, the basic point is the one you make there about time. I mean, you realize this as soon as you look at a chart of compounded investment returns over time. What you realize is that it starts going up much more steeply at the end.
Yeah.
And no one gets to that end and says, I really regret starting when I did. I should have started later.
Yeah.
You always want to have started sooner so that you get more years at the end when everything's compounding rather rapidly. So yes, time really, really, really matters. Even if it's only small amounts that you're putting in, you're really going to feel the benefit over those long periods of time. We should just say there is an implication here for, how you're employed matters, right? Doesn't it? Because, you've spoken there about employer contributions. That obviously applies if you have an employer.
Yeah.
And if you have an employer these days, you're likely to have been automatically enrolled into a pension. But people might have all sorts of different statuses in work, mightn't they? They might be sort of contracted in work or self-employed. They're going to need to go out and get their own kind of pension in order to make this happen.
Absolutely. And although if you go down the personal pension route because you're self-employed or you're not earning enough to be in a workplace pension, you won't get those employer contributions, but you still will be getting that very valuable tax relief from the government, which can really turbocharge your savings. So it's absolutely worth still doing it. And as you say, from a young age, and even small amounts will make a big difference.
Yeah, and I'll confess it, probably not the last confession we're going to make on the pod today. This was definitely a mistake that I made in my 20s. I started my career, I'm sorry to say, before the advent of auto-enrollment into pensions. So it wasn't automatic. You had to opt in, and I didn't have the money. That scenario you described right at the start, that was me, absolutely. You know, it was just sort of, I had no money, and the idea that I was going to, I could sort of opt, or just choose not to go for this thing that was going to take more money off you. Brilliant. That, I wasn't going to do it. But of course, I regret that. I really wish that I'd started in those early years of saving into a pension. Okay. Mistake number 2.
Yep.
Getting into the wrong sort of debt. Now, before we get into this answer, lots of people will start their 20s with debt, and it will be quite normal for that to be the case. Debt of all different kinds. So debt isn't necessarily something to be scared of, but it can become a problem. So what do people need to avoid?
Exactly. So I think when you're in your 20s, I remember being bombarded with advertisements for overdrafts, credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes, all that kind of thing. And it can be very tempting. As you say, it's not about debt as a whole being bad. If you think about mortgages, that's a very common kind of debt to hold. The problem comes when it's high interest, short-term debt, and you're relying on it to cover lots of your normal expenditure. That's the real problem, because it can spiral very quickly and you can end up owing a lot more than you ever borrowed in the first place. The best way to avoid this is by having a really strong emergency cash safety net. So experts generally recommend having between 3 and 6 months worth of your usual spending easily accessible as cash. So if you have an accident or you need that money quickly, you can access it rather than having to go into debt. Now, if you're young, it's possible that you haven't yet built up that safety net, but it's really important to think carefully before you take on debt. And lots of people think that you need to already be in debt to speak to a debt charity. That's not the case. If you're thinking about potentially taking on debt, I would definitely recommend speaking to a debt charity who can give you free, impartial advice and help you figure out what's going to be the best option. Yeah,
what you say about you being offered lots of credit really, really rings true. A big lesson that people need to learn is that just because someone's offering you credit does not mean you should take it. And equally, just because they say you can repay X amount of pounds every month, that doesn't mean that's what you should be repaying, because it's very likely that will be set at levels that will keep you in debt almost indefinitely. And actually that, again, cards on the table. That was another one of my mistakes in my 20s. Leaving education with not crazy debt, but like a little bit of overdraft, a little bit of credit card debt. I could have really done with being sat down and someone say, like, have a plan now to clear this in a as most sort of aggressive way as you can, because there's no problem in being in debt at those ages. And actually the numbers overall are quite small when you consider what happens to your earnings later on. So you don't need to panic about it, but just have a plan to clear it, because if you don't, it's amazing how the years can go by and you're just servicing this debt. And lots of people who end up in sort of chronic debt over the long term are amazed when you show them how much they have actually repaid, but haven't got out of the debt because of interest rates. This is the negative compounding that you said right at the start. It's really key to get all of that under control as soon as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Mistake number 3, kind of connected to some of the others, but it's spending but not saving. Okay, so really related to your outgoings. It's fundamental, isn't it, to getting your finances under control? What is there to say here?
Yeah, it can feel really hard when you're young because you do have incredibly high rental costs. You've got your student loan repayments and all of that. But it's more about, as we said earlier, building the habit rather than the pounds and pence amount that you're able to put away. I always like to think of saving as a bit like going to the gym. You're not going to get results overnight. It's about going regularly and building the habit. And, you will get that 6-pack in 10 years or whatever it is. And as your salary goes up, if you're able to put 10, 15% of that away, as your salary increases, the actual amount that you're saving will increase alongside that. And if you're able to put away a regular amount into a savings account, that can help build that emergency cash safety net that we were talking about earlier, which will then help you stay out of debt. And a really good way to do this is to automate your savings. So on payday, you can set up a direct debit so that a certain amount of money goes automatically into a savings account. It means you don't have to think about saving and there's no temptation to spend that money. Yeah,
and there's a sort of order of priorities, isn't there? I mean, if you do have debt, you should clear the debt. But then saving on top of that and being willing to address your spending in order to save and say, well, a lot of people might say, well, my spending's fine. I'm not getting into debt, but I have no savings.
Yeah.
Then probably you should be looking at your spending and say, well, actually, what can you carve out from your spending in order to create a little bit of space in your finances for saving? Because often it can be done with zero sacrifice to your actual life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you mentioned the canteen. We laughed about you bringing the lunch in every day. But that, and dare I say, what really annoys people is when you say, don't have a coffee or don't have an expensive phone or whatever. Those things actually do affect your life. So I'd be, have those things if you really want them. But other things don't, get cheaper deals for you if you can. Can you eat in rather than out occasionally? All these things. And as you say, having those good habits when the amounts are a bit lower in your 20s means that you have good habits when the amounts are bigger in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. So another kind of good habit forming one here.
I always used to, when I was saving quite hard in my 20s, I used to think of it almost like the rule that you get in improvised comedy, where it's kind of like never say no, say yes and. So rather than having to deprive myself and say no to things, I try and think of an alternative that was less expensive. So people say, let's go out for dinner. You go, yes, and how about you come over and I'll make us a really great lasagna or something. And you can do that for like £10.
Yeah.
They can bring wine, they can bring dessert, and you're probably saving £20, £30 versus going to a restaurant.
Indeed, yeah, and there's loads, infinite really examples of that. Okay, number 4 on the list, quite a technical one, but it's actually very important, I think, not building up, or the mistake being not building up a credit history. So why is this a mistake? I've got views on credit agencies. So why don't you start?
So having a credit history will really impact your ability to make big decisions later in life, things like being able to buy a home or even renting a property. And how this works in practice is that there are, as you say, credit agencies, and they give you a score based on how reliable they think you'll be at paying back a loan. And having a bad credit score can really impact things like getting a mortgage later in life. But if you have a bad credit score, you might not be able to get a mortgage, or if you can, you might get much worse rates, which will make it much more expensive to take out that loan. But the good news is there are simple things you can do to improve your credit score. So even just registering to vote, that can help. Paying your bills on time, that helps too. And some people will take out credit cards, use that for their spending, and then repay it in full at the end of every month, which builds up a positive credit history. But the only thing I would say there is to only do that if you're really comfortable that you can stay within your limits, stay within your means, and pay it in full. Because if you can't, it could actually have the opposite effect and be really detrimental.
Yeah. So, credit scores. I think one of the first things that people need to understand is, as you said, you framed it correctly, it's a score which can tell a lender whether you're reliable in terms of paying money back.
Yeah.
It's not the same as saying, well, because you might think, well, I have no debt. I've never had any debt. I must be a great prospect to lend to because, I haven't got a history of, defaulting on loans, etc. It's not quite the same, is it? The agencies will score you more highly if you have had debt and have gone on to reliably pay it off. That's the basic rule.
Yeah.
I actually this is going down memory lane.
It's a litany of your errors.
It is. I mean, but I remember being probably in my 20s, I'm sure I was, and going to get a mobile phone and being told, no, you can't have it because your credit score, and you kind of forget that a mobile phone contract is a credit agreement because they're kind of giving you the value of the phone, I guess, and you have to kind of pay it back. So it counts as a credit agreement, and I couldn't get one. And the reason I couldn't get one was because of changing address and electoral roll, not being on the electoral register. And these things can be really maddening to sort out. You don't know what the problem is. And it can be frustrating to have to deal with a credit agency, and they'll say, well, a lender has said this about you, but we can't do anything about that. It's very difficult to sort these problems out. Best, as you say, to get on top of it, get a good credit history. If there are problems, find out what they are and get going, putting them right, because you don't want to have all these problems when you're trying to get a mortgage, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay. Finally, mistake number 5, Marianna, is not taking enough risk. Not something you'd normally associate with young people in their 20s. So what does this one mean?
Yeah, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but essentially when you're in your 20s, often the goals that you're saving for are quite far into the future. It might be 5 years away, 10 years away, even decades away if it's your retirement savings like your pension. And actually with those longer term savings of 5 years or more, you can afford to take a bit more risk with your money. And if you don't take enough risk, you actually run the risk of not being able to get there in the first place. So if we take the example of cash savings, for example, they feel really safe, very low risk. But actually, history would suggest that over these longer periods, there's a good chance your cash savings could be losing value in real terms because of inflation. Whereas if you were investing over 10 years, 20 years or longer, history would suggest there's a much better chance that your savings would be growing faster than inflation and you're going to reach your goals much faster. And so although investing comes with, higher risk on paper, it also comes with the potential for higher rewards. So that's something that's really important to consider.
Yeah, and people at those younger ages, they might think, when if they're in a position to get into investing and put their money at risk in that way, and that other finances are sort of make that appropriate, they've got savings, etc. They might think, well, I don't know really what I'm doing. I'm inexperienced, and therefore I have to be ultra cautious. Now, caution is a good thing, but as you say, it can negate the whole point of the exercise. You are trying to grow your money, and that involves risk. Actually, these people who are younger can probably afford to take more risk, can't they? Because if they're genuinely able to invest this money for the long term, they've got these long timelines. And as we know, the longer you invest for, the higher the chances that you'll make some kind of positive return. there will be ups and downs along the way, but the longer it's invested, the more you can be sure that you are going to get those long-term gains from investing. So don't be shy, basically.
Yeah.
You've got time on your side.
Absolutely. And I remember during the COVID crash, so March 2020, it was relatively early in my investing journey. And it was so disconcerting to see your investments just drop massively. Like your heart does jolt. But because I knew I was investing for the long term, it was for a house deposit, which I thought was kind of 7, 8 years away. You just have to keep fixed on that long-term goal and go, I don't need this money right now. Why would I sell at a loss right now when I could wait 7 or 8 years and just see what happens?
And actually, with those longer timelines, no one says this, but you kind of want that to happen. You want prices to fall so that when you contribute and you buy in more, you're getting better value. There is just one modifier I would add to this whole discussion around risk. Yes, take enough risk, but we all know there's a certain type of person that wants to take on lots and lots and lots of risk, and the world is offering them lots of opportunities to do that through very, very short-term investments, trading, day trading in investments, crypto to an extent. So don't be swayed. It would be a big mistake to be swayed by what you see on social media around very unrealistic gains that might be available. If that's your thing and you want to go for it and you've got it in the correct perspective, then fine. But don't confuse that with the more reliable routes to kind of growing your wealth.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to my gym metaphor earlier, if someone was offering you this crazy protein shake that was going to give you a 6-pack overnight, you would be very skeptical. And it should be the same with investing. If someone's offering you this incredible crypto deal that's going to double your money overnight, you should be similarly skeptical. And there's a big difference between long-term investing in diversified global funds versus day trading or speculation.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, we've covered a whole ton of stuff there, Marianna. So let's leave it for now. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. It means that you'll get updated content as soon as it is released. Give us a like or share the episodes. It really does help people find what we're doing here. That all said, Marianna, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ed.